Business Matters chat. As Anna said a little bit earlier, we welcome your participation with questions down in the chat box. How this will work is we'll turn this over to the county executive to give his remarks. He can speak for up to the full hour if he really wants to, but I don't think Jonathan will. He'll give us his remarks and then we'll have an interaction with questions. Anna will facilitate those and pull the questions from the box. We'll try to get through all of the questions if time allows, but if not, we'll get through as many as we can. So today I'm pleased to have with us Racine County Executive Jonathan Delagrave. Jonathan was elected as Racine County Executive in April of 2015 and again re-elected in April of 2019. He's born and raised right here in Racine County and has lived here all of his life. As a county executive, Jonathan's priorities are attracting economic development, developing our workforce, expanding mental health services. Throughout his tenure, Jonathan has forged partnerships between state and local municipalities, schools, technical colleges, and universities, as well as private enterprises to ensure the success of the region for generations to come. Jonathan lives here in Racine with his wife, Katie, and their children, Madison, McGuire, and Mackenzie. So please join me in turning this over to County Executive Jonathan Delagrave. It's all yours, Jonathan.
All right, thanks, Mark. I promise you I won't speak an hour. I know as an elected official, we often like to hear ourselves talk, but I promise it won't be long. And I see Mark Behrens is with us. And Mark, just like with Mark Hanadel, no hard questions, please. So I really want to talk about three things. One is kind of, workforce development and kind of where we're at post-COVID, and just kind of the challenges and what your workforce development solutions or workforce development board is kind of taking on. And then I'll move into kind of COVID, where we're at in Racine County in the dissemination and of COVID vaccinations. And then just take 2 minutes just to talk about our new youth care center. And you're probably wondering, well, why are you interested? Why you should be interested in it? I think there's a couple things that I think you'll take great interest in. We're hoping for partners of all kinds to be a part of our new care center. So really with the workforce, pre-COVID, we obviously had challenges of recruitment. I spoke at Comar a few months ago. It was warm weather, so probably July or August, and kind of workforce priorities and how we're trying to overcome COVID. And some of this mirrors that. So a lot of this you guys may have heard already, but there's also a few new things that we're working on since then that we've promised, and specifically to our manufacturers. The pandemic in Racine County has obviously demonstrated the growing need for really these key priorities: equity and inclusion. If we're going to lower unemployment rate in Racine, equity and inclusion has to be part of that. Talent pipeline management, which we've talked about at Comar, and there's a few things that we're doing now, specifically with specific manufacturing employers that I'll let you know. And then just our short-term trainings that we think will be of benefit as well. So what we've heard pre-COVID and post-COVID in terms of the similarities or what has not changed is the need for labor, the need for employees to show up on time, work hard, wake up the next day, show up on time and work hard. And a lot of that hasn't changed, whether it's pre-COVID or post-COVID. And I'll talk about some of the things, like I said, that we're doing with some manufacturers. Obviously, there's a barrier here in terms of the unemployment piece to this of, people right now are not required to do a work search. And they're still getting, money per month. That's inhibiting a little bit of our recruitment process to be able to deliver you guys employees, but that's also changing for the better as well. And then working with RAMAC, we do know that there's still a huge segment of our population that are are still scared of COVID and are not really willing to return back to the workplace because of the risk. So with those two things in mind, unemployment is at its high right now in Racine in a long time in 2020. At the height of COVID, unemployment was about 8,800 more I should say unemployment, 8,800 more county residents filed weekly unemployment claims than the same time as last year. So almost 9,000 more people. That's an astounding amount. And the good news is while claims are dropping, or I should say the good news is claims are dropping, more residents on average are filing unemployment during COVID, still at an alarming rate. Where we are, where businesses are already struggling, in my mind, to find talent means there are 4,000 fewer workers each week to help meet our demand. So, I mean, if you're plugging those numbers in, we're really in dire straits. So I want to just talk about two projects that we're working on and potential grant opportunities. So, and while we need to still build capacity, what we've done, for example, at InSinkErator is we have job success coaches that are now going there every Monday morning. And InSinkErator has new hires that come on board every week because their demand is so big. So these job coaches, in conjunction with HR and the managers or supervisors at InSinkErator, are working with those employees on the onboarding process. And this has gone on for a month, and we've seen some really good numbers of individuals coming back. And these job coaches show up every Monday. They work with those who have been hired, and they've also are working with the new employees who's it's their first day of work. And the supervisors have the contact information of the success coaches as well. And it's really talking about what are their barriers? Why did they show up late on last Thursday, even if it's 10 or 15 minutes late? We also have economic support workers that are joining our success coaches to talk about childcare and potentially transportation issues as well. So we can talk about overcoming those barriers. The success coaches, like I said, they come every week on a Monday, and it's gone really well, and we hope to expand that. Now we know that demand that InSinkErator has doesn't always, match the demand for other manufacturers or mid-sized manufacturers, but we want to grow this to be able to provide this service to those, that have a high demand, who potentially have been experiencing high turnover. The second piece to this is we've kind of consolidated our economic support initiatives into one bucket, and we're able to take out of that bucket names of employees or names of people who that we know need and have an appetite to work. But in the past, we've kind of just taken these names and said, all right, InSinkErator, here are these names, go out and interview. And it always hasn't been a match. So what we're doing is we're taking time with these individuals to get them ready to be interviewed by manufacturers or by employers, I should say. It doesn't necessarily have to be manufacturing. In trying to, as best we can, smooth out their initial barriers that they've had or that they do have. So when we supply those names to you, they're more ready to go. So I'll give you an example of a manufacturer that we're working with that had 88 openings, or I should say 80 openings. We supplied them with 80 names, and 22 of them have kind of passed the test and have been employed and are doing pretty well, even though we're kind of in an infant stage. So, it's about a 26-27% success rate. That's probably our highest. It's still low, but it's it's our highest that we've had, and we continue to refine our process. So, when I spoke to Komar a few months ago, we heard loud and clear, talent pipeline management is great, but we need you to do something different. And these are two examples that we've kind of are doing different. And we can't, unfortunately, grow this as fast as we want, but we're committed to growing capacity, seeing how this will work out with InSinkErator and the success coaches, and merging our economic support workers, having our employees, our success coaches on site. If you're willing to do that as employers, we think that can work. So those are two or three good examples of kind of how we've changed since I spoke to Komar recently. The other piece to this is that, we as a county set a goal by 2025 to try to match the city's unemployment rate to the state's unemployment rate. And we brought forward an initiative of Uplift 900. And that 900 really is the number that we needed to drop to match the state's unemployment rate. And that number actually came down to about 420. So, to be transparent here, we took the low hanging fruit, those individuals that were unemployed that had a decent work record, or who had, not as many barriers, and we got those individuals back in our workforce. And then COVID happened, and that put the number back up. The city of Racine in particular, when you hit these challenges of a recession or a pandemic, they're kind of the first to take the hit in terms of unemployment, and they're the last to kind of get their unemployment back down. And that's just from the dynamics of what the city is right now. So, but that being said, we know that we've got to really do a good job, better job, the county working with all of you in terms of race equity and inclusion, because we want to make sure that specifically with the African American metrics that placed the city and county, as the second or third worst place for African Americans to live. We know that's a resource that's in abundance and that we need to tap into. So our workforce development board, or our workforce solution board, really is to really work on this. And we drilled down the data, and I know some of you know this, but to get off that top 15, top 20 list, some of those things we can control, like African American home ownership, African American high school attainment, African American bachelor degree attainment, African American home ownership. So we've kind of looked at what the numbers are. So for example, we need 216 more African American high school graduates a year to get off that list. So, I think that's very doable. We need $1,200 more a year annually for African Americans in household income, and we're off the list. And obviously that reaches to the employment piece of this. We need, roughly about, I think it's 216 more African American home ownerships, and the county is really kind of weighed in and is working with the private sector and our nonprofits. You'll be hearing about in 2021 and trying to accomplish that goal. But then there's some other dynamics that we can't control in terms of who the state of Wisconsin is incarcerating. If you look at the state of Minnesota and who they're incarcerating and who Wisconsin is, and I'm not here to debate who's right or who's wrong, but that's a metric that's taken into consideration for our ranking, and Minneapolis incarcerates far less than the state of Wisconsin. So we're kind of weighing in on that, and that's something that, that ranking we didn't get in overnight, and we're not going to get out of it overnight. But I think there's some things we can work with our school districts. I see Jody on the call. I appreciate you you tuning in, Jody. It's working with Parkside in Carthage on bachelor degree attainment. It's working with the private sector and some of our nonprofits on getting properties that are not on the tax roll back on the tax roll, in getting African Americans into home ownership, and not just home ownership, but if your HVAC system breaks down, how do you fix that? If you have a bad roof, how are you going to fix that? So there's an educational piece to this as well. So that's kind of what Workforce Solutions is kind of working on, other than, the main piece that I hear from you, on a continual basis is we need people, we need qualified people, we need people who are interested in working. And I hope that as we can scale up, we can meet that demand for you as well. And then just really quickly about the fast forward trainings. Over the past 2 years, Racine County, working closely with RAMAC and the city, we've helped train roughly 250 residents in the construction and advanced manufacturing field. We have our STARTS model, and those are the high demand fields that we did a study with Manpower, that those high demand fields that Racine County is going to be having. So it's advanced manufacturing, it's healthcare, it's supervisory, it's retail, trades. So we're really trying to focus on a different model, because we know those fields are going to be in demand. We want to make sure that we're meeting that demand. So I'll give you an example of kind of 10 years ago, how our Workforce Solutions modeled and how it was really ineffective, and how we're kind of moving into a different way to meet those demands. So essentially, if somebody came in and said they were interested in cosmetology is not an in-demand field. We would set them up with training and send that individual on their way to be a cosmetologist. Well, we don't do that anymore because of not only of the demand, but the capacity. We're serving one person instead of 25 or 50 in cohorts. So now what we're doing is creating cohorts to match the demands that the demand fields that I just mentioned. So, we're trying to look forward and match what you guys have, what we know what the need is and what you guys need in terms of businesses to be successful. So that's, I know I've talked a lot about already, but before I take questions, I did think it would be important just to kind of update you guys on COVID, if you don't mind. So the county has one chance to get this right. The county has one chance to instill confidence in our residents that we're doing everything we possibly can to make sure that when vaccines come, that they're disseminated as fast, as efficiently as possible, and by how we're prioritizing those who get them in order. So healthcare workers and nursing home care workers, our emergency workers, paramedics, and police officers. But the point here is we've got one chance to get this right, and we're going to work as hard as we can. And I'm pledging to you guys, all of you, that we're going to get it right. It's an all hands on deck effort with our partners. In healthcare, we know Ascension and Aurora are going to have to play a big piece because, we need enough people to be able to give the vaccine, let alone the amount of people that are needed to get the vaccine. So that's going to be a real challenge for us. So all levels of our healthcare, our government, and our nonprofits are going to have to get on board and align, and pretty quickly. And we'll be fully prepared, but there's dynamics that we can't control. So we're putting a plan together that we can be fluid and flexible. Unfortunately, the state, in my opinion, the Department of Health Services doesn't have their act together. So we've got to be flexible, and when they finally give us some information that we need, we'll be ready to go. And vaccines are already here in Racine County, small amounts and allocations. Again, we're prioritizing by CDC and Department of Health Service standards. Vaccine distribution will be done in phases. I kind of mentioned, how we're prioritizing in terms of healthcare workers, long-term care facility residents. And then there are legitimate reasons for me to be, I think that we all should be hopeful and optimistic for those who feel like they want the vaccine. But that doesn't mean it's going to be here tomorrow for a lot of us. This is going to take a lot of time. And, I think we're going to be into March and potentially late spring before we can get everybody who wants to get the vaccine, that they can get it. So that's kind of where we're at. Again, it's really working with our health departments, the county's emergency operations center, and our healthcare networks, specifically Ascension and Aurora, to align and disseminate those vaccines when we get them on a prioritization basis as fast and as efficient as we can. So I've looked at the clock here, and I think I'm over my 15 minutes, so I apologize. The last thing I do want to talk about is our $45 million new secure residential care facility for our youth. And so why does that matter to the business community when we're talking about at-risk youth? Well, there's going to be a lot of components into that care facility. And yes, it's secure in nature, but the programming that we can make and come out of it is what we're going to need your help with. So if we have a 16 or 17 or even 15-year-old kid in our care center, we believe that, working with Gateway, we can start to get them on a track of a skill in terms of the trades, or we can expose them to manufacturing. And, while we work with them to talk about trauma-informed care and work with them and their families and their peers, ultimately returning back to the environment which they came in, we believe that we can expose them, boys and girls, and healthcare is also another aspect of that as well. But we believe we can expose them and get them on their way to a career track of their interest. And that can be another piece to supplying a labor demand, or labor, to help with a labor shortage here in Racine County. So, we're going to be coming to you in the next 6 months to 9 months to really work on, what is the best way to attract interest? What have been your experiences on getting your employees initially interested? How we can then take that, and while we're working with them on mental health and AODA issues, and family issues, how we can get them, when they're leaving our residential care facility, either have direct contact with you as an employer, or at least they've been exposed, and we can lead them in the right direction into these key employment areas that I mentioned before, that we're going to see in the next few years here in Racine County. So we got the $40 million or $40+ million. The county is on the hook for the rest. It's a 95-5 split. And then we're hoping to get some major grants as well. So we look at the design of the building is this spring, and then construction beginning this summer, and then be ready to go by the middle of 2022. Well, we already have a lot of partners on board in terms of Big Step and the school districts in Gateway. So, but we're looking for more partners, especially in the private sector, to help us with some of the things that I just mentioned. It's going to be located, I guess I should have told you that as well. It's going to be located right outside our human services building. So we have to expand parking, which we've already have gotten a plan in place to do that. So it'll be right in our parking lot. It's a probably the largest building project the county's ever taken on, but the state's paying for 95% of it, and we're gonna cash in on this opportunity, literally and figuratively. So, yeah, it's been almost 20 minutes, I think. So I apologize for going on a little bit long, but Matt, if there's something that I haven't covered that you think I may, I'm willing to do that, or questions or
Sure.
comments, whatever's
Before
the best way.
before I let Anna get to the questions with you, if you wouldn't mind, why don't you just give us, because I'm sure there's going to be many questions out there. Why don't you just give us a recap on where we're at with Foxconn and how that's progressing? I know Jonathan, I had an opportunity to tour out there a week ago. I was quite impressed with what I saw. But why don't you give us an update?
Yeah, I was hoping you wouldn't bring that up, Matt, but I guess I'll have to answer the question. Um, no, despite what you hear, Foxconn is the county's largest taxpayer. So number one, that's positive. There's a lot of construction activity on the ground in Racine County at the Wisconsin Valley Science and Technology Park. Currently it includes 4 buildings, total of almost 1.5 million square feet. And the company has invested well over $500 million, right here in Racine County. So, that's the good news. I talk to Foxconn every week, and the project is fluid. And while that's challenging, that's also an opportunity. So, pre-COVID, I think we know they were designing to make, X widget. Post-COVID, now they're getting into something else that's advanced manufacturing, but it's high in demand, and it kind of goes with the dynamics of our economy. So, I think we're fortunate to have an entity, a company the size of Foxconn that can kind of, create product based on the demand of our economy. So, we had a demand for ventilators because of COVID. They went in and made that. They had that partnership, and they made ventilators. That contract is now up because the demand of ventilators has stopped, but they're going to be moving into other products. The hiring piece of this is, they have, roughly about 500 employees right now in various different areas. But the long and short of it is when Jenny Trick and I and a couple others went over to, and this is probably inside baseball, but I'll share it with you guys anyways. When we went over to Osaka and saw their manufacturing plant, which is, fairly similar to what they have now, they kind of told us that the mistake they made is they didn't monetize the land around their site. And they didn't want to make that same mistake here in Wisconsin. And so, when they bought property, when the county fronted their loan, which went to property acquisition as well, they wanted to be able to monetize that, not just with suppliers, but with retail and restaurant and service industry type businesses. But, Foxconn really, that's not their niche. And I think they found that hard to do, and especially in terms of housing. So that's kind of impeded the progress a little bit because they didn't really know what they wanted. But now they've kind of changed course, and, they've asked the county and RCDC to help with building up that area, working and trying to recruit suppliers, whether they were a match for Foxconn or not. And that's going really well. The infrastructure is out there. One thing that I think is forgotten is that we didn't have water and sewer in the I-94 before Foxconn, and now we do. And, the I-94 expansion, Kenosha and Milwaukee had it, Racine didn't. That happened because the county worked hard, but, we had a catalyst in Foxconn, and the federal government was able to give us the money for that construction project to happen. And I know there was some, rough times in terms of lane closure and whatnot, but it's really worked out well. So just, but also, and I'm going to use Jerry Frankie's line here, but, before Foxconn, east of I-94, we had very little new housing development. Now we're starting to get some in Mount Pleasant. I think the Mount Pleasant Economic Development or Community Development Authority passed another housing project. Our planning commission, I'm not sure which stage it was at, but passed another project that on county-owned land. So we sold the land to, or we're in the midst of selling land to a developer for more new housing on the Brown Road, site near Foxconn. The city of Racine has built some apartments as well. Even Union Grove and Waterford have new housing developments going on. So, we're growing, and some of that's because of Foxconn, and we need to grow. We need to grow. Again, Jerry Frankie really helped us out in terms of working with our municipalities on talking about higher density and in kind of working with them on different types of housings, really make a community, a municipality, even a better place to live and do business. So, Foxconn, look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's challenging. We continue to work with them, but I see, and they're continuing to work with the state to kind of restructure their contract. And I think we'll hear things fairly soon on that end. But if you look at it in totality, it's going, what I would say is pretty well. Some more challenges to come for sure, but certainly, we're very optimistic that it's going to be a really promising site in the near future.
Great. Yes, most of the questions I did get ahead of time were around Foxconn, believe it or not. So, and then the other question was the vaccine related. So you're making this really, really easy on me. But great segue, you talking about, the western part of the county and the eastern part of the county. Is there one really good question I received was, are there ways that eastern to western, western to eastern can better connect business and community? I mean, what are your, I'm sure you struggle with this a lot. We hear it even here. So what are some ways that the eastern part of the county can better connect with the western part of the county and vice versa?
Yeah, what I learned as county executive is that, that actual line is not I-94 in terms of eastern and western Racine County. It's really actually, in my opinion, Highway 31. And I say that a little bit facetiously, but also there's a little truth to that. We've done a number of joint projects with Western Racine County and Eastern Racine County working together. The latest one is you'll see a real positive story in early January about broadband connectivity and how, we've got rural broadband issues and we've got urban broadband issues, especially with kids being at school remotely. And we've really come together on that to do some connectivity issues. So that would be one example of working together and creating a benefit and a win-win for both Western and Eastern Racine County. The other piece to this is that, we're working hard at resilience community with the wingspread with all the heads of government. And, we're looking at consolidating services where it makes sense, where the cost is less and the services are even better. And we've been at it for a year and a half. COVID kind of slowed us down a bit, but I think you're going to see some really consolidation opportunities there, especially in our frontline services, as well as potentially our parks. And then, really it's about continuing to have that dialogue where we can, meet and kind of work together on what are the similar challenges that the west and east of our county meet. And we continue to move forward, but I think people would be surprised, not just on the connectivity issue of broadband, but on the consolidation of services. Another example would be Western Racine County or Central Racine County Health Department's going to consolidate under the county. You're going to see that in the beginning of January 2022, and that could potentially lead to more consolidation for health department. So while it's a challenge, I think we've blurred that line as I think farther than it's ever been blurred before, and we're going to continue to work at it.
Great. And on a personal level, you should all go visit Burlington if you haven't in a really long time. I did recently. It was delightful. Back to Foxconn. Does a smaller Foxconn impact Racine County financially, finances, budget-wise at all?
So, I mean, it's a great question. So essentially, where is the county exposed at Foxconn? Essentially, initially, it was really about $142 million loan to Foxconn for infrastructure and land acquisition. Through the process, that went down to about $105 million because property became less. They didn't need as much property. And so that's basically, that payment is due over the next 20 years. 1/20th of that payment is due either through a special assessment initially, but the payment's due in January. So it's a payment plus special assessment, and that Foxconn pays back. Their first payment was due last year. They paid it early. And there's a lot of leverage that the county has because Foxconn does not really essentially want to give up the land that they have now. So we're not really exposed from the money the county fronted. I shouldn't say that. I should say, at least in the short term, look, I would never declare victory on this Foxconn project, and I'll never declare defeat. I think it's a continuous improvement project, and we want to make it better every day. But for the foreseeable future, we're not really exposed. Foxconn made their first payment early. We anticipate, them continually making payments early to the county. So, there was an article in a rather liberal media piece or publication that's been anti-Foxconn, but they wrote what I thought was an interesting article on why Foxconn won't leave Racine County. And essentially they don't have leverage with their local development agreement with the county and the village of Mount Pleasant. There's too much that they would have to lose. It's too much that they've already invested. So, we feel good that we feel good that our local agreement does not expose the county in particular at all. They pay taxes back to us as if it's a $1.4 billion facility, even if it's a lowered amount assessed valued facility. So they're paying us back based on that $1.4 billion valuation.
So with that, like I said, I had a lot of Foxconn questions. This was information to me. So the development agreement between the village, county, and Foxconn prohibits the sale of any land to others. Is that still correct? So would you agree that now with all the changes, should that get renegotiated so that developers that are out there that want land to develop do
so? Got to be careful about speaking about negotiating with Foxconn because obviously they're in negotiations with the state, and once that's done, we're gonna also take a piece of it as well. I think a couple of things, right? We want tax, so whatever goes into that Area 1 really want Foxconn and specifically suppliers to be able to get those tax credits. Currently, those entities wouldn't receive tax credits even if they go into Area 1. So we really want that. Foxconn really communicating to us that they want help in terms of recruiting, whatever that may be, to build up the valuation. Area 1 is a big deal. So not trying to expose the county in its negotiating process, but while still trying to be transparent. I would say that would be nice. I think that there's ways to get to that, whether it's exactly to that point or close to that point. I think that's something that, we want to look at for sure. I think it's just a matter of how can we build up Area 1 as fast as we can. I think, Foxconn realizes that as well. So, I think there's a lot of dialogue that Foxconn realizes that they didn't realize a few years ago. That certainly, well, maybe not, it may not look directly like that. It can look similar to that. Yeah.
Thank you for that. So I'm gonna take a hard left turn here, and someone wanted you to pitch and talk about the need for foster families and any information you can give about foster families to keep kids near their family, friends, and teachers.
So real quick, foster care is the backbone of Racine County. And I should say businesses in foster care. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, how is that? Well, look, we have about 200 plus kids in foster care right now. And we're in a foster care crisis. Right now, we've done huge recruitment efforts for foster care families, but it's really replacing, we're recruiting fast, but it's really replacing the ones that leave us. So we're not gaining, we're just keeping our head above water. So from a fiscal standpoint for the county, there's levels of care for our youth. So the first care is if we have a child that needs to be taken from their home, we try to get to a relative. That's called kinship care. That's the cheapest way to do it for the county. Relatives we don't really access dollars for them to take care of a relative. I mean, we do a little bit, but ultimately, it's very low cost. Second level is foster care, and our foster care families and our crisis foster care families, they take on a large burden for us. It's the second best costliest way for us, I guess that's not a double negative. But that's a way for us, not only from a fiscal standpoint, but from just a best care standpoint, foster care families. So that they take on these kids, they don't get a lot of money a month. I think it's around $220 a month. That's not even close if you're taking on one or two. I mean, that's the cost of diapers and food and other basic necessities. So foster care families are really paying a lot of money out of their own pocket. But the kids they get a great placement. It's oftentimes in a great house and a great family. But then if we don't have foster care availability, then it goes to group home, and group home costs are really expensive. The placements are a little bit more, it's harder for kids to adjust in those placements because it's often with other kids sharing a room, 10, 12 kids in a group home, and it costs the county a lot of money. And then the next level is crisis foster care service. That's even more expensive. And then you get on all the way up to corrections, which, right now it's about $510, $520 a day for one of our youths to go into correction. So if you look at levels of care, we need foster care families, not only, for the fiscal impact to the county, but more importantly, it's the best placement. Kids are happier. Our results or our return on investment are great. And ultimately, whether the foster care child goes back to its family or they're adopted. It's really a great placement. It's the trauma involved is far less than a group home, and foster care families and foster care in general is really important.
Yeah, sounds like a win-win. At this time, we're right on schedule, and I don't have any other specific questions. So Matt, if you want to wrap it up.
Yes, I will. There is one thing in the chat box, Jonathan, if you could comment on this, it's not really, it is a question, but it's really thrown out to everyone. It's construction workforce development initiative and training was mentioned. And someone on the call as an employer in a construction field, where can they get more information on the program?
Sure. So that would be, I will give you Ed Kamin or Kamin, spelled last name is Kamin. And let me see if I can get you his contact number in 10 seconds. Do you know it? It's on my cell phone. Let me look it up real quick.
I'm putting it in the chat box while you
All right.
discuss.
Let's see. Do you have his work number? Yeah, I just have his cell phone number, but Matt, if I could give you his work number.
We can get
Oh,
it.
I have it. It's 638-262-638-6449. And he would be able to point you in the right direction in terms of, we have a grant. It's a manufacturing grant, not a construction grant, but so, probably doesn't apply it into the construction piece of this, but he would be able to get you connected to that, to what you're looking for.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Before I wrap it up here, anybody have any final question for County Executive?
There was one that came separately. Anything about any information about the hotel projects going on, especially the one by Festival Hall? I don't know if that's city, county, both.
Yeah, I would defer to the city on that. I mean, I do have some information, but I probably, it's pretty fluid. So I would defer to the city as not to give out wrong information.
Okay.
I know to stay in my own lane.
All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up. I want to thank Jonathan Delagrave for being our guest today. I also want to thank all of you for joining in and submitting your questions. I'm hoping that everyone is enjoying these Business Matter chats, and just remind you that our next Business Matter chat will be in January, on Wednesday, January 20th, where we will have Ascension Hospital President Kristen McMahon on, and we'll get an update on everything COVID and hopefully some further vaccine information. So hope you can join us at that time. I want to wish all of you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And thank you for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan.